The next session is going to focus on the Biden-Harris political prisoners, otherwise known as the January 6th prisoners. Speaking on this issue is David Sumrall, founder of StopHate.com. So, David, if you'd like to tell us a little bit more about yourself, that would be fine. Otherwise, we can go to the.
I would love to. Thanks for the invitation to be here with everyone. It's been a spectacular experience for me just sitting back listening to these other very knowledgeable people. I hope that people take action with the information they're learning here. That's been really my focus for years. I started Stop Hate in 1992 when I saw the LA riots and what the media did with a little clip of film and how they divided the country into basically a race war. And I wondered what we could do to help fix that problem. You can't throw money at it, you can't break up the fight, and you can't put up the fires, put them out, but you can help prevent the next situation. That's what we've tried to do. Stop Hate is an acronym, stands for Start Turning Off Prejudice, Heal Attitudes Through Education. And in our adventures, I guess, over the last 30 plus years, we've taken on groups such as the KKK, the Nation of Islam, the American government at this point that we're fighting every day for our freedoms. And we did a lot of demand free speech issues during Trump's presidency, trying to express to people the importance of the censorship, the deplatforming, the debanking before it was a popular topic. Before Mike Lindell lost his bank account or Michelle Malkin couldn't get an Airbnb, we were in the streets trying to warn people. And I think it's that watchers scenario where you try to, let people know what's coming so they can gear up and help protect themselves. It's part of our mission, part of our goal, and part of what we do to educate other people. So before January 6th, I did the Stop the Steal rallies in Austin, Texas, tried to help coordinate the efforts there. I didn't have any intention of going to January 6th. I was tired. I had done a lot of events and I was spent, and everyone convinced me that I should go. My wife, my friends, my Lord said, you need to go. And, 30 years of experience dealing with Antifa, BLM, the media. It was a really good time for us to be there and hands-on. So I took a film crew and we went and spread out on the grounds to film at the Ellipse and the Capitol as the day progressed, because we knew the media would never tell the truth about what happened that day. No matter what they told you, it wouldn't be the full story. So we literally spread out to capture history, on video, and then to, share that with the world. So when we got back to the hotel that evening, I knew immediately from the verbiage, the pre-orchestrated propaganda verbiage, talking points about insurrection, this and that this was part of a longer setup. And that we knew that when we got to the Capitol before the first gates went down. I literally told my crew, this is a setup, guys, and we'll have to see how it plays up. But getting back to the hotel and seeing what they were doing already in real time was probably the most telling part for me, to see the situation that we'd found ourselves in. And then several of my employees have been charged for being there on January 6th, various different reasons. Many of my friends have been charged, and a lot of guys are still sitting in prison right now that I have known for years. It's not just I met them because of January 6th, but way before. So I knew that the stories they were telling in these committee hearings and impeachment trials, and then of course the select committee, when they change timestamps on evidence and no one calls their hand, when they try to blame President Trump for the police line break, when it was obviously because the police gassed themselves out, things that we've proven about the day that the media will not cover, that even the people that are supposed to be on our side, it's almost like this is propaganda that's being slow dripped out for the control, and it's been delayed until this election so they can use these J6ers as their talking points. And I understand, in a lot of ways, the same situation happened with General Flynn. We had to expose how the deep state was, trying to take him out. He was single-handedly fighting. So we actually, Tamara Lee, Pat Scopoliti, myself, Josh Mancias, worked on the pardon of innocence for General Flynn. That's where that came from. And now we're doing the same thing for the January 6ers. It's either a pardon of innocence or a pardon of mercy. There's a book Suzanne Monk has been instrumental in putting out for President Trump to be able to take action that first day, we've got people that are suffering from the terrorism of this government. And in case you're wondering, terrorism is the unlawful use of violence or intimidation, especially against citizens for political aims. So by the very definition, we can't be terrorists. We're not after politics. We're after freedom. We just want our life. These politicians and the system are the terrorists. By definition, I want people to realize that and really let that sink in. And so I've testified in 10 January 6 trials. I just drove in last night late from Washington, D.C. again, back to Texas in my 10th trial. And of course, I can't talk about that one. It's still going on today. But I can tell you everything about the other 9 that I've testified in on how the prosecution sets these poor people up, how the judges censor what video even gets into the court proceedings, how the juries disregard the truth and convict these people. They're just waiting for the judge to shut up long enough to say guilty. Or how through the video evidence, we try to get these different little snippets of time put into the record so that they'll be made public so the American people can see what's going on, because all the video evidence has been hidden by the government, the media. It's all selective and selectively edited. And so I put out 4 documentaries trying to show the entire truth about the situation. We put one out in June of 2021 called Writing History, RIGHTING. And it's simply the people's viewpoint of what they experienced that day from their own cameras. It's not heavily edited at all. And then Bloody Hill was to explain how this was set up by the government, how the select committee is using their lies and the deceit against the American people. Then 1,000 Days of Terror shows exactly what happened on the West Side, that the police started the violence, opened fire on a peaceful crowd that was standing there saying, please don't shoot us, please don't spray us. We're here to redress our grievances, on megaphones. And yet they gassed them, sprayed them, opened fire on a peaceful crowd, started the events of January 6th. This has been hidden from the public. The thing that's not being hidden is the terrorism from the media, the social terrorism on not only social media, but the news. You know, every day we're seeing more and more stories about these grandmas that have been the object of manhunts. And when you realize that all the summer of love, and we see that 2-tier justice system, the deaths, the murders, the policemen that actually died in that summer of love, there were no charges. There's no real repercussions. A lot of people get their slap on the hand and released. But if a grandma walked onto the property through an open door, stayed in the velvet ropes, and left peacefully without ever causing a ruckus, she can go to prison in a very hostile situation, not a country club prison, but they're very specific. There was one defendant I want to just mention that was supposed to go to basically a halfway house the judge had ordered her to. And at the last moment, she ended up in one of the worst prisons in California, which has since been shut down due to sex crimes within their institution against prisoners. But to be subjected to that by this Department of Justice intentionally, over and above maybe even the wishes of a judge as to where they want to send them, then you start to see how pointed and specific their purpose is in extracting their pound of flesh. And I just want to go a little deeper and just say that, you know, January 6th was our Tiananmen Square, you know, where our government attacked innocent protesters, brutalized them, murdered several of them. 4 innocent protesters died on January 6th due to police action. I'm not going to say it's murder or homicide, but I'm just going to say the investigations need to be done. 4 innocent people. The officer didn't die that day. He died the next day of a stroke. It was unrelated to any action on January 6th per the coroner. And yet these stories were pushed out first by that lamestream media to double down on the lies. And then you have Nancy Pelosi on the first anniversary of January 6th saying, we are working with the national historian to get our version in the record. How can you have an event a year after when the select committee is still in an open investigation, there's been no conclusion drawn, and you're having an event that puts all these things in the history book and nobody on our side stopped that from happening? It seems extremely intentional. It sounds and smells like the uniparty And then when you realize that there's only been a handful of representatives that have lifted even a finger to help these J6ers, you can start to understand some of the frustration with what the people are experiencing. So, being there on January 6th has put me in a very unique position, of course, as a witness to the events that happened. And then as a video investigator, lawyers hired me early on. They were looking for information for their clients and noticed that everywhere they looked, stophate.com came up because we were compiling video evidence. We probably have the largest database on the planet of January 6th. So they wanted me to be their video investigator. So I'm licensed by the Department of Justice to dig through their files. And I've had that access for over 3 years. And yet the media on our side isn't interested in that. The media on our side doesn't share all the documentaries we put out. The media on I just want people to understand that there's problems not only on the media on the left, but the media on the right. And the people are screaming and begging and pleading for help that's not coming. And I think it is up to the people. General Flynn said a long time ago that we are the citizen journalists. And I took that quite seriously. I'm a carpenter by trade, but now I've made 4 documentary films produced with others that is way out of my wheelhouse. And yet here we are taking the action necessary to support the people in the best ways that we can. I have also worked on, dozens of cases for January 6th defendants. I've worked with their families, the support groups, helped develop many of them. I'm on the board of directors for 2 of the nonprofits that support the victims and their families. And, I know the title of this is the Biden-Harris political prisoners, but early on we started changing that verbiage because we know this war on words is so important. And I want people to realize prisoners have rights. Hostages, not so much. And these people, for the first year plus, couldn't trim their fingernails or toenails, couldn't get a haircut, never got a chaplain, never got visitation, spent way more than allowed by the Geneva Convention in isolation conditions, enough to drive people insane, have not been dealt with medically, have not had access to their discovery. The court kicked the can down the road for these folks for months and months, and we're looking for more discovery. And I get in trouble all the time because I say we need to put these same judges and prosecutors in prison and, for 3 or 4 years until we get more discovery. It might take a while, but that's what they've done to us. And there's a disconnect between what they believe is fair and what we know to be true. So that's the suffering of these people that I just really want you to understand. And we're at a point now that it's no longer you have to do something. It's either thought crimes or guilty by association. And we're seeing that not only with Trump, but down to the individual level where Enrique Tarrio wasn't even in DC, but they convicted him for seditious conspiracy and put him in jail for 22 years. Or Ethan Nordine didn't do anything physical, didn't hurt anybody, anything, but the thought crimes. Or Joe Biggs, he's ex-military, he could do something. So we need to hold him because these guys could be violent. I mean, you trained them in the military and then you're going to hold that against them. So it's a really unique position that these people find themselves in. But I think it's a sure sign that, we're living under tyranny when the lawfare is set like that. I want people to realize that when you get to court, they strip you of your First Amendment God-given right to free speech, the right to assemble, the right to gather, the right to redress your grievances, media, or religion. Those are the real main reasons that everyone went to January 6th in 2021. And as soon as you get into court, the prosecutor says, Judge, I make a motion that we strip the First Amendment because they're going to try to hide behind that as an excuse as to why they were there. And we obviously have them on video at the Capitol, so they have to be an insurrectionist because they came with this violent mob that Trump sent down to hang Mike Pence and overthrow their fragile democracy, which is as far from the truth as anyone could see if you watch the video and don't listen to the fairy tales from the officers who lie in these courts, like Officer Fanone or Dunn or Ganell. There's a ton of liar policemen who've been hired to carry this narrative forward, and they do it consistently. But I think the First Amendment deprivation of constitutional rights is extreme. And I don't think people realize that when you get in court, you can't say, I went to protest, or I went to see Donald Trump, or I went to gather, I went to pray, which so many people did. And once those initial signs and barricades were gone on January 6th, nobody knew that it was a restricted area. There were no police to tell you it wasn't. There was no red line painted on the ground, and there was no sign that you couldn't go down front and wait for President Trump like he said he would be there. Unfortunately, the violence had popped off before his speech even finished, so he was not allowed to come. But did that spur the police to tell us that President Trump would not be visiting? Did they give exit routes? No. Did they give loudspeaker warnings? No. They attacked the crowd with munitions, and they were trapped. There was no place for them to go. So it's as intentional as it could be. I want people to realize stophate.com. Those 4 documentaries are the first on top of the page at our homepage. They're free. Just go watch them a couple hours. You will learn more in that amount of time than you've learned in 4 years from anyone in the media, and it's all there on video. The select committee verbiage, I want people to understand when they change the timestamps and double down, and the media backs this up. And it's literally on social media. If someone did their own due diligence and research, you can find the proper timestamps for the videos to know that the select committee lied. And then that same verbiage that they developed is being used in these federal courts against the January 6ers. The same verbiage which says how much of a setup it is, how much these teams of lawyers, prosecutors, there may be 10 or more lawyers in these courtrooms studying what these defendants are saying, learning how to tiptoe around these charges so that they don't set a precedence that actually helps other defendants. You see them use the 1512 ruling about the official proceeding interruption against so many people to pressure them into taking a plea deal for a misdemeanor that puts them in prison, which is unheard of. The FBI is not supposed to mess with that, but here we are with 20 years for a 1512, or take this plea, you'll get 2 or 3 or 5 years and some 3 years probation and fines. And what do? I mean, that's the situation these people find themselves in. And I just want, you to realize how much partnership is involved between the government and the media, complex wise. I mean, it's not just a surface thing. It's very deep. The media also won't cover the trials. We used to have the trials on Zoom, and then we used to be able to call in and listen to them. Not anymore. The judges do not want people to know what's happening in these trials, and reporters won't go cover them. Like I said, this was number 10 for me. And I would have loved to see a major news reporter in there experiencing with me what it's like to be so attacked as a witness by the DOJ, or as an expert, a video expert, and to just be, systematically, attacked and try to discredit. And yet every time they try to double down, we prove through video that they are the ones that lie. And it still doesn't matter in court. These people, 99%, are found guilty. So everybody wonders how this works in time with who's the bad guy and why. And I want you to realize there's a phrase called domestic violent extremist. And if you look up George Washington University's program on extremism, you'll see this laid out very clearly. A domestic violent extremist is anyone that's a threat to persons or property. So I like to say they'll J6 you, because they can put you in prison indefinitely without due process as an American citizen for whatever reason they see fit. That's where we live. That's the reality of it. So a domestic violent extremist threat to persons or property means the little old ladies from the church group want to go march around their Capitol with their signs. If someone inside says, whoa, they scared me, or I think I saw a gun, or they said something really mean, those little old ladies could get thrown in jail without due process indefinitely as American citizens until the government sees fit to address them. I want you to know that's what's building to where we're going. And the stage has been set. The president is there based on the J6ers. We have been going through this for 4 years. They are setting it up for everyone else. So when you realize the information's been hidden from the public and you've been robbed of the information, you've also been robbed of the proper emotional response. If you don't know what happened, how can you be upset or sad or want to get motivated enough to help. And by changing from day one saying, oh, these people killed a policeman, which was so far from the truth, but they know how to play these propaganda games. And I think when we go back to 1999 and remember where China declared unconditional warfare on us, which means no bombs and bullets, but media, hostile takeover of your systems, your administrations, everything in your networks, basically. And that's where we are. We hear all this talk about China Joe. We see Feinstein's driver. We see the spies that people sleep with in Congress. We see a lot of involvement. We see China buying up property. We see this virus situation we had, and we wonder, how has this been going on for so long? And I want to know, is there a copy of that treaty or that truce that China signed with us afterwards? Because there's not one. They have subverted our systems. They are infiltrating our government. That's why this all smells just like China. And there's so many references to that as well. But in I think, conclusion of that, I want people to understand that what January 6ers are suffering through is really nothing new. And other communities of other color or socioeconomic backgrounds have suffered these same injustices by the same suits, by the same judges for decades. It's just our turn now. Look, a lot of those other issues didn't affect us, so we didn't care. But now it affects us, and now we care. And I think that's a point for people to be able to come across the aisle and say, this is something that we can both really get a hold of. The DOJ and the BOP, the Board of Prisons, has to be reformed. The January 6ers are talking to other prisoners that aren't January 6ers saying, look, we're suffering the same thing. They overcharged us. Look, I had some weed, but I didn't have 10 pounds of weed, and they charged me with 10 pounds. They said over 3 years just to get them in the system, just to get that pound of flesh, just to get them paying into it. And it's all a racket, whether they're making money off the prisoner's work or their commissary, which is over expensive, or anything. There's so many different issues that say that it's a racket. And the judges have a vested interest in keeping those prisons full because their retirement's based on that. So how can it not be human trafficking at that point? So I just want people to understand that, it's all about information and action. What can I do is the question a lot of people ask me. And, it is a war, on truth, and it's all about information and knowledge. Alex Jones was not wrong about that. So we've tried to present a lot of this information at stophate.com. It's searchable, it's shareable, it's researchable, and that's why we put it there, so people will do their own due diligence. It's unfortunate that most people don't. And so we've tried to provide tools that make it easy. The documentaries, the J6 A True Timeline, that Tucker Carlson said everybody should see that in America. They haven't, but they should, and I agree with that. But when you talk about the information that we could share that we don't, then it's on us. It's our fault, because this has been out for a long time and people still don't know it. And you can blame the media complex, you can blame the censorship, you can blame a lot of things, but there's nothing from stopping us from going door to door and meeting our neighbors and friends and saying, hey, I care. I don't want to fight. This is not about war. We don't have to agree on everything, but we do have to agree what's important is freedom, our basic principles of our founding fathers. And that's been subverted and taken away from us so much. But I think the education part is so critical, and it's hard not to be, it's hard to be non-offensive and still be offensive. You want to be pushy, but not arrogant. You're not a know-it-all, but you want them to get the information. We've recently had a film festival. The 1A Film Fest is the poster behind me, a couple of weeks ago. And we took 12 highly censored films that cover topics from COVID to the election integrity issues, to January 6th, to the aftermath with the FBI, to human trafficking, to the media's attack on Donald Trump. I mean, 12 very powerful standalone films that tell an even more powerful story when watched together, which is amazing that they're standalone, not related, but they all have a common thread. And I want people to experience that and share it with your friends. So what we did is we had this film fest, and we've since worked on an after edit production to where people can share this with people. Look, there's power in film. That's why we did a film fest. It's hard, and I know from experience that trying to explain all these things to people is almost impossible. You can take in so much, and that's great, but to show them visually through film, through the documentaries that I've done, through other pieces of very important work, it makes a different impression a lot of times. There's certain power in that. So we wanted to make this film fest accessible after the fact. We've taken the trouble to try to edit this down and make it shareable. And the reason behind that, folks, somebody might not go to a rally, they might not want to have a conversation. I can totally understand that. Everybody is in their own way. But you can send them a link and maybe they'll watch a film. Maybe they'll watch 2 or 3. Maybe they'll watch them all. Maybe you'll save their life. Maybe you'll change something for them. Maybe it'll click. And it doesn't have to be confrontational. And I think a lot of times we do this from our soapbox, and we don't like it when anyone else does that either. So it's not well received. But I think getting back to the grace that is America, saying, you know, we are together, united we stand. And a couple of years ago, I said, to save America, we must get back to the basics, get back to God, and get back together. And I truly believe that that's the last little part. I think we're getting back to God. I think the revival through COVID and the shutdowns and everything, I think the back to the basics has happened. You know, we're there. We lost all the football and bars and everything for a while, and people understood what it was like to be around their family again and get to know them. And now if we could just get back together as a people and understand that, unfortunately, our enemy is not each other. We've just been pitted against each other. The old story about the jar with the red ants and the black ants, and they get along fine until somebody shakes the jar. Well, it's the government shaking the jar, and we're the ants, and we're all on the same level. And the government's up here. We need to start looking up, not at each other, to figure out where these problems are and work together towards solutions that we can solve these problems together. That's what it's going to take. But 1afilmfest.com is where you can go and get that pre-order. I think it's almost ready, probably another couple of days. And that's a tool we put out to get out before the election, so we can try to, you know, educate more people about the realities of all those different situations that we cover, all 12 different topics basically. And I think there's power in that as well. But I want people to understand it's not by chance. It's not random. It's not a mistake. It's not just a happening that just, oh, it was so unfortunate that all these things work together against the good people. There's only one way to control a law-abiding citizenry, and that's to criminalize them. And that's what they've done long term, from Hillary Clinton and the deplorables all the way through these insurrectionists. They're trying to make it as comparable to 9/11 or Pearl Harbor so they can get those 3,000 numbers. They want to destroy 3,000 American families and their immediate circles so they can get that pound of flesh, because we showed up in mass, because we were upset that they weren't representing us. It scared them to death. The police attacked, murdered, maimed hundreds of people, not murdered, but maimed hundreds of people. That's the reality that we lived with on that day, that has been stolen from the public. We hope that someday it will be rectified and that people understand the reality that we've lived with in taking one for the team. And I'd like to just end by saying, I truly believe that J6ers not only averted a civil war, but have saved the Constitution, America, and the world. Because without what they've done, we wouldn't have that expose. And the sacrifice is real. I just want people to realize that.
Great. Thank you so much, David. Please give us the link again, so where we can see these videos.
Yes, 1A, like First Amendment, 1afilmfest.com. And you can see those documentaries there as well. It's $25 for 12 films, awards ceremony after interviews, a lot of panel discussion. It's going to be a great production, and it's just all about education and having the tools to get the job done.
Right. Is there any congressional oversight or any bills going through Congress that would supervise the litigations and the court cases against the J6ers, and what is being done at the congressional level to try to rectify the injustice being inflicted on the J6ers?
Well, unfortunately, nothing as far as I can tell. I mean, there's those occasional Matthew Perna bill, or a congressman will try to visit the jail, or they'll have a field hearing and talk about it, and then a year later they'll have another one and talk about it. But there's nothing solid. I mean, if just a representative would go down to the jail every day, it's just down the street. They seem to get better treatment. You know, if people know what's going on, and yet for some reason the oversight committee feels like they don't have the ability to just push their way into a prison and see what the conditions are, and yet they do. And it just makes you, kind of leery of, you got guys like Clay Higgins doing a fantastic job putting things on expose, but Clay will tell you himself, we don't have the power to bring charges. We can only investigate. That's the other guys, and they're not going to do that. So we're kind of stuck in this rut where it's really up to the American people to be loud and to say, look, we're not going to take this anymore. You're setting this horrible precedence of insurrection when it was actually on the inside of the building that was happening. Like Roseanne Barr said the other day, they overthrew America and blamed it on J6. Literally, that's what happened. And just to kind of put this in perspective, because it's hard to understand, I truly believe that the police in DC, the Metro and the Capitol Police, live in that DC bubble. All they see is their media, their talking points, the politicians on both sides, especially the left, saying how bad these Trump people are, whatever. They were literally scared that we probably were there to hurt them, because in November, when we had a rally in DC, everybody was attacked. In December, a lot of people wore body armor and helmets and defended themselves. In January, we expected BLM and Antifa. They didn't show up. So we ended up going to the Capitol with all this gear on. And the cops went, they're here to kill us and eat us. And they maimed us and murdered us and get away with it with impunity. I think not. I really hope Tom Fitton's Ashley Babbitt lawsuit coming up in a couple months does well. It's going to be up to the public perception and opinion that we win this war. It's not going to be in the court. The bar is broken. It's owned by the bad team, the judges, the prosecutors, everything. And to watch these attorneys on our side try to struggle and fight against them is very frustrating. We need mass. We need a lot more hands on deck to do this heavy work. And we just
all right. So just a few questions here. So, do you have any insight as to whether the FBI was the group that constructed the noose?
So the gallows that you're referring to, of course, I want people to realize, yes, there were gallows there that day, and they were not sizable enough. They weren't real. They wouldn't have held a chicken up. They were, I think, a thumbtack and a piece of string, basically. But on the side down at the bottom, it had a display sign that painted very big on the bottom, said, "This is art." So I want people to understand what a political expression is. The same as carrying a pitchfork. You're not going to stab somebody, but it's a political statement. And for them to take something like that and use it, it's almost a diversion that keeps you from talking about the deaths that day, like Kevin Greason, Benjamin Phillips, Roseanne Boylan, Ashley Babbitt. And if you're talking about Ray Epps or talking about the gallows, it's a diversion from what's actually important. Or if Stephen's son has a hearing one day and you spend the night talking in a space about Ray Epps, what good are you? You may not be on our team as a journalist after all, if you're not talking about what's actually important. And there's a lot of that going on, unfortunately.
What you said about the prison industrial complex, there was actually an article written 4 or 5 months ago in Bloomberg Business Week. That's a pretty liberal publication. And they were saying the same thing you're saying, hiring out your prisoners is a way to make money, the state benefits, the prison benefits, the warden benefits. And it was talking about how insistent the guards and the wardens are about making their people work. And the choice is either you're going to get beaten or you're going to get raped if you stay at the prison, or you can go work. That's true. And it is like China. People get pulled off the street in China to go into prison so they can work for free, basically.
Well, I would take the job. All that other stuff doesn't sound too fun, but the way it works, and literally they'll pay them $1 a day or $2 a day so that they can say that it's not slave labor, but it is. And they may charge $1,200 a week for that job. and pay them $8 or $10 for what they did. And a lot of these are actually even military contracts that these guys should have no business dealing with. But the military is even farming its money out because they can make more. It's all a racket. It's all greed. It's all profit. It all needs to come to a crashing stop. And we need to start shutting some prisons and figure out what works better, like institutions, like mental health, like prevention, like things that really benefit our community, and not just try to persecute people that made mistakes. I mean, there's so many things that are broken in the system. And I think it's just a matter of time before both sides of the political spectrum wake up and say, we're tired. We're tired, man. It's killing us all. We don't have to hate each other. We might disagree about stuff, but good grief, man. We're all Americans at the end of the day. Our government's working against all of us. What are we going to do about it? And that's kind of where I leave it.
When we ran a similar program a few months ago, I said, for people that have been spoon-fed by the mainstream media and don't really understand what happened on January 6th, just assume that this happened in Russia. If there was a protest, a couple thousand people came peacefully to protest in front of the Kremlin, and they were beaten and gassed and incarcerated up to 100 days in solitary confinement without being charged. If all these things happen in Russia, we would say that's a terrible thing. We would say Putin is just effecting retribution against democracy seekers or people that are not supportive of him. All in the same thing is happening here.
That's right. It's like Tiananmen Square, the freedom protesters. I mean, these are pro-freedom advocates that were mowed down by their government, blamed, imprisoned. And if you talk about it 20 years later, you still go to prison in China. Same in America. That whole China influence, I think, is on full display for people to see.
Yeah. So a few months ago, my understanding was the conviction rate for the J6ers is just about 100%, right?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Two people out of 1,500 plus so far have walked away scot-free. And it was, the first one was in the very beginning. I believe the judge was heavily reprimanded for letting him walk without any charges. So, and the second one, it's another fluke deal. I'm not really sure exactly how that happened, but only two. And it's not the grandmas that got free. It's not the innocent elderly people that got free. It's just two random guys that like I said, it's very uncharacteristic, because it seems to be, other than the 100% kill rate for the government, the DOJ, the prosecution, and we feel the effects of it, and here's the deal. If you fight, they're going to be extremely harsh on you. If you don't fight, you're still in trouble. They won't go as hard on you. They just want their plea. They want their conviction. They want to say, we got another one. And these J6ers are strong enough. A lot of them have not had to take the plea. Some have, and I understand that, but they're not going to bend the knee to tyranny. They're not like wet cardboard. The government thought they could just mow them over, and they've stood for something that's principled. And I think when we talk about January 6th, the size of the crowd and the fact that everyone knows that the police could not control the crowd. So who did? The crowd self-controlled. It policed itself. It would have been horrible death numbers. We could have killed everyone, burned the building down, took pieces home for paperweights or whatever, collectibles, but we didn't. And it was never our intention. And I think that, unfortunately, we've all been poisoned by this media and propaganda on both sides to hate each other first and try to figure it out second. And that's the wrong order. So I think we get back to the basics on that would help us all a whole bunch.
I've heard that some of the J6ers that did get some degree of leniency only got that because they self-confessed and they agreed. They had to make a political statement like they believe Trump lost the election. I think one had to commit not to watch Fox News.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And tell me what about this re-education stuff? Did you know that these convicts now, these J6ers, they have to go through re-education, which is all the things that you would think it would be about how Trump's evil, all the laws he's broken, all the bad things he's done, about the insurrection. It's a re-education program. The next is the encampments. Kamala says she's going to build 30 million new homes. I'm not sure that's not just encampments and they're going to give our houses to the illegals. You know what I'm saying? So pay attention to what they say. A lot of times they really mean it, and like fundamentally, Obama was right when he said, look, if you lose faith in your elections, that's the beginning of the end of your society. That's what they wanted. That's where we are. And now we're at a point to where if Trump wins, they're not going to believe it. If Kamala wins, we're not going to believe it. So nobody's going to trust the outcome. And they're trying to push us and push us and push us into a conflict so they can control us, or we'll do their dirty work and eliminate some of us for them. And we don't want to sign up for that. And I think it's just all that more reason to understand that if they're going after Trump so hard, he must be doing something right. And I don't think he's a fix all cure all. And I hate that he's as old as he is, because we need somebody that can, keep going and go. It's just, who's going to be next? So many questions. We just need to get people active, get them involved, get them in the know so that they can make informed decisions about who and who not to support and move forward.
Okay, maybe just the last question. I believe when I read Julie Kelly's book, she talked about after January 6th, the Capitol Police, and maybe it was also the Secret Service, started becoming more politicized. The Democrats wanted to defund the police, but they expanded the number of offices that the Capitol Police have, I think, in different cities in the U.S.
Yes.
And there was some legislation that the Republicans wanted, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but something like the union representing the Capitol Police basically said something, if you sign on to this legislation, we're not going to offer you much protection. Something like that.
Yeah, so that's where we live, and that's the weaponization of the government. There, of course, the Capitol Police should be restricted to the Capitol. It's there in Washington, D.C. There's no reason for them to have a field office, say in Florida, unless it's to help them lock up innocent J6ers. And I'm not into that. I was really upset with DeSantis for allowing some of these things to happen. But there's that, and it's really hard to understand or explain away because it's criminal to me. I can't do that to my neighbor or my friends, and they're letting this happen to American citizens. And the diesel therapy, the isolation, the prison conditions, the food, the lack of visitation or lawyer visits, it's all that terrorism that we talk about, and the public doesn't know. I just in my heart believe that if the public knew about all the things that are happening, we'd be in a different country right now because we would do something about it. It's just sad to know that these people and their families, we've had over 20 deaths in the J6 community since it happened. At last count, I think it was 23. Many suicides that people don't. Now, they're not all suicides. There's car wrecks and sickness and everything, but suicides, guys, that people can't take the weight of the federal government, the knee on the neck, and there's not the support from the public because we're so easily entertained and distracted away. The convoy, the truckers, this and that, and the support, the money, the funding that they've needed to fight these fights, keep their lights on, pay their bills, keep their service. And it's been horrible. I just hope people go to stophate.com/J6. Look at the calls to action on ways that you can support these people. Some are absolutely free, some a couple bucks, but stophate.com/J6 for those calls to action, and just help us out as you can. We appreciate every person that does.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much, David. Excellent insight, very powerful. We really appreciate the work you're doing, being so involved in those 10 cases you told us, the films you're making to further educate us in a non-confrontational, entertaining way, I think is very powerful. And we appreciate you spending time with us today as well. Thank
David, thank you for having me today. It's been an honor and a pleasure. I look forward to doing it again real soon.
you. Okay. All right.
Thanks.